David Bowie famously said, "I like my music to awaken ghosts within me." And that's exactly what Springsteen does on this new album. But is it any good? Let's find out, shall we? Welcome, classic rock fans, to an episode of New Album Review, where new albums are excavated and explored. If this is your first time to this channel, be sure to click like, subscribe, and check that bell so you get notified of any future uploads. And if you have a moment, do check some of the links below this for ways you can support me and my channel. It's always much appreciated. So Springsteen has a new album out, A Letter to You, and it's an album that has a valedictory quality to it. It's cluttered with ghosts and reminiscences. The past lurks behind every note of this record. And don't get me wrong, it's an album that certainly delivers what we expect from the E Street Band. It certainly has that clatter and strum of those glory days. But it is it's far more introspective as regards its theme and concerns. The atmosphere on this record is very much about raking over the ashes of what was in order to formulate a response of what is. So this album very much gazes inward, something that Springsteen does very well and has demonstrated on albums like Nebraska and even his last album. What Springsteen is capable of doing is producing these very intricate and profound musings that are often incredibly moving. I was concerned that this album would be a political anti-Trump tract, so to speak. Crikey, you try saying that. But thankfully, even Springsteen has acknowledged that this sort of political tub thumping is the last thing people want or need. What Springsteen does well is when he looks into the heart of his characters and has them look outwards to a world where they no longer belong. Perfect example of that would be Youngstown, for example. This is when political commentary is at its most effective, when people can become invested in stories of people's lives, and those narratives, of course, unfolding amidst the tragedy of the world. However, with this album, it's a far more personal reckoning in many respects. It's a man of 71 years of age looking back on his past glories and past friends. Springsteen has a well-deserved reputation, of course, for being a champion of the disenfranchised, a kind of blue-collar troubadour, with those stadium-shaking anthems like Born to Run, and narratives of Cadillac ranches and endless highways. This iconography, of course, provides the backdrop from which the angst and sweat of these everyday struggles play out. And play out in a way so perhaps the protagonists or even the listener can excavate some glimmers of hope from these stories. The gospel, of course, is very much about not letting the hardness of the world destroy you. The central message on this album is very much about reconciling what has been and the desire perhaps to lead a more simpler life. All those brilliant disguises that were formulated on those earlier albums with the E Street Band just fall away one by one. This album is quite stark in that respect. I love the way Springsteen evokes that familiar country rock motif, big black train coming down the track. It's a deathly metaphor, of course, well furrowed within the paradigms of blues and country and folk, as I've said. But what Springsteen does here with this is effectively sets out his stall for the tone of this whole album. And of course, this album comes rather hard upon the orchestral-tinged Western stars, and not forgetting his stint on Broadway, of course. But this record feels different. It pulses with a sentimentality. Not in a syrupy or an affected way, but it has an authenticity to it, an honesty. It's like he's flicking back through the songbook of his own experiences and memories of those kind of left by the roadside, so to speak. It's a deep, resonant critique of his own life. I think this album's strength is its spontaneity. It was recorded very, very quickly. It has a very live in the studio feel to it. You know, we get those emblematic guitar jabs and phrases as the organ sound swells and throbs throughout. It's a wonderful listen, musically and lyrically, and it's all accompanied, of course, by Springsteen's familiar tubercular rasp. And these Street Band sound fabulous on this one. They don't. It kind of moves away from the soupy production values of Born to Run, but it's not as stark or as visceral as Darkness on the Edge of Town. A nice balance is struck between the whole thing sounding a lot warmer and more inviting. That honesty of sound and clarity of vision is beautifully represented by the production values, of course. The music is built around strings and acoustic strumming. It's a sombre and reflective affair, and Springsteen articulates the phrases in a tentative entanglement of wordplay and emotion. He sounds pensive, almost like a man walking to the confessional. Nebraska was a harrowing record, and there are elements of that here, but what is effectively critiqued here is his own past, rather than the fraught narratives of fraught lives of other people. Rolling Stone has pointed out that there are several levels of Bruce Springsteen working through different dreams from different times. And this retrospection, the sense of looking back, is certainly helped by the fact that Springsteen includes some songs written as far back as 1972. There's even a track that I think is a kind of an off-cut from the Darkness on the Edge of Town sessions. These effectively become a literal snapshot, a moment in time, of course. I love the barrage of referencing we get on this record as well. I love the line, like a river running along the edge of town. There's a sense of him looking to reach some sort of conclusion here. Whether this will be the last album he and the E Street Band do, who can say? But there's as I said at the beginning, there is a valedictory quality to this one. You get lines of longing like, baby, baby, I'm so alone, baby, baby, I'm coming home. He not only sings to the ghosts of his past, he seems to be grappling with notions of his own mortality here. And this is never more apparent on a song like Last Man Standing. I love the line, for example, when you were hard and young and proud, running raw and loud. It reads like he's flicking through the faded Polaroids of his own past. He sings, of course, I'm the last man standing now. The whole mood of the number is contained in the lines, beautiful lines, faded pictures in an old scrapbook, faded pictures that somebody took. The faded pictures serve as an appropriate metaphor for life, for a life perhaps that just feels elsewhere. There's a deep reverential feel to this album. I love the sound of the church organ that's used here. I think it's used on the track House of a Thousand Guitars. It gives it almost a hymnal quality, almost if Springsteen is sermonizing on the transformative nature of music itself. I love the line, here the bitter and the bored wake in search of the lost chord that will band us together in this house of a thousand guitars. Lovely pun on chord here, and maybe it's the same thousand guitars that strum away on Born to Run. The song sympathetically builds upon experiences of playing music, all its energy and rituals, with it building sensationally, of course, with the voices of the E Street Band. Celebration of the ties that bind, so to speak. I love the way we get Springsteen, the man, very much gazing back on the music he created in the 1970s. And his career in music is referenced in an almost quasi-religious vernacular. I mean, lines like, I turn up the volume to let spirits be my guide. And these ghosts, of course, are remembered affectionately as they rattle their chains from the margins of his own past. And it's all accompanied in the beautiful backdrop of the piano before culminating in the E Street Collective strum. I mean, this whole album is one long Springsteen-y moment. Overall, I think this album is about finding peace, or needing to find peace in the remnants of your own past. And the resurrected numbers work beautifully here. For example, Janie Needs a Shooter, which is an outtake from Darkness on the Edge of Town. If I Was a Priest and A Song for Orphans, they form the retrospective heartbeat of this record. Songs on Springsteen's own back pages perfectly epitomise this album's relationship with his own biography, his own history, whilst being very much anchored in the present. There's so many wonderful elements on this record to recommend, including the excellent co-production of Ron Aniello. I don't know if I've said that right, I do apologise. Not to mention the usual weighty Springsteen allusions, the biblical folklore and urban blue-collared mythologising that he does so well. We get the wonderful Dylan-esque wordplay, especially on those earlier numbers, and big sweeping musical flourishes that, like ghosts, will haunt the listener long after the needle has run its course on this one. And other songs, of course, fulfill that usual Springsteen, those well-furrowed Springsteen motifs, the search for faith and value of community as he traverses his own timeline and generations. We're treated with those gorgeous cascades of language in those past numbers, which, interestingly, is juxtaposed with the terseness of his more contemporary writing style. An interesting number, of course, If I Was the Priest, has the Virgin Mary giving out personally blessed balloons as Jesus wears a buckskin jacket, probably not too dissimilar from the buckskin jacket that Dylan wears on the Freewheeling album. Janie Needs a Shooter is a gospel-infused number, a bizarre narrative about predators in which Bruce Springsteen plays this guardian angel to a vulnerable girl at the heart of the story. We don't fully escape allusions to Donald Trump, of course. Springsteen employs some quite effective jabs in some of those older songs that were written long before Trump's presidency, of course, but no doubt Springsteen is aware of their potency and power to resurrect them now. For example, he takes aim at a demagogue who tricks farmers into believing he's a rainmaker. Sometimes folks need to believe in something so bad they'll hire a rainmaker. As I've said, this song was written before Trump took office, but the fact that it's coming out now is certainly Springsteen seizing the political and rhetorical power of those lines. There's no Born in the USA or Badlands on this one, yet his voice reveals a rage from the past that has effectively delivered him to the place he is now. Letter to You is wonderful in the sense that it reveals a huge debt to those gone, and to a past that has kind of crafted his music and the person that he is now, that 71-year-old man looking back. To me, the central meaning in Springsteen's music is learning to live with suffering, and from suffering, hopefully, one can excavate hope. It's about having the wisdom to accept what cannot be changed. That doesn't mean you can't rage against it. But on this record, Springsteen beautifully embraces that truth for himself as well. The album ends as it begins with that hopeful "I'll see you in my dreams," declaring death is not the end, a very Dylan-esque reference. And of course, it's a sentiment that carries with it all those departed souls that have accompanied him on this amazing journey. And the living moment and the past are beautifully brought together in the line, "Your spirit filled with light, I need you by my side." I really, really like this album. I would recommend it to anyone. So do please give it a listen and let me know what your thoughts are on this review and this record. Anyway, thank you for watching. You've been watching an episode of a new album review. As I've said, do click like, subscribe and check that bell. And most of all, thank you for watching. Do stay safe. And more importantly, please do keep listening.